Okay, good morning. My name is Josef Brandauer. I am from Gettysburg College, a small liberal arts college. I'll talk about this in a little bit. I am standing in for Erica Wehrwein, who could not be here today, so you are stuck with me. The good parts are Dr. Wehrwein's, and the mistakes are all mine. Please ask me questions, and she also gave me her slides and also her contact information if you care to get in touch with her about specific questions. So my 15 minutes will be on the topic on how to dissect a job announcements. We had called it dirty little secrets before. I thought that was a bit intimidating, so I changed it to little secrets. And hopefully you'll see there's very few secrets after all. If you're paying attention, ask some good questions. All right, so outline my talk. This can be a fairly complicated road to look for a job. I know it was for me, and it was a very stressful time. It was a part of a job that I didn't really expect to take so much time. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself first, because I think it's a little bit like raising a child when it comes to talking to people about how their job search went. It's very personal. And other people's experiences don't necessarily mirror yours, nor should they. So I will give you an update on how my experience went, but don't confuse that with advice I'm giving you, because you really need to define that for yourself. I told you where and when I looked and how I did this. We can talk a little bit about the ranges of types of positions that exist and institutions that offering teaching positions, and teaching is in quotation marks with intent, because your teaching position is not necessarily what I think about mine. We talk about tips for preparing an effective application. We have talked about this among the panelists before. There's some common things. There are some things that differ between institutions. And from my experience, I can tell you there's things that differ between the departments of my very small liberal arts college. And then we'll dissect a couple of ads and see how you could maybe personalize your application based on the job announcement itself. Okay, so here's one of the buildings I teach in. This is Glapfelter Hall at Gettysburg College. I am essentially this person. From a professional hiring perspective, we do contribute a lot in shared governance at Gettysburg College. We sit on each other's search committees, so I have co-written a fair number of job ads, and I've reviewed many and met many very excellent candidates coming through our campus, and also seen some mistakes that were perhaps unnecessary mistakes to make. My locus of tenure is at a health sciences department. This is essentially what you could imagine a human biology department at Gettysburg College.
Just trying to up your volume.
Oh, no one's ever said I'm too quiet. Okay, so I'm going to speak into this a little bit better, sorry. At a liberal arts college, what that means, this is important, is that we have a medium teaching load. A medium teaching load to me means a 3 and 2. So I teach 3 classes one semester and 2 classes and the second semester. Small class sizes. I never have a class that's more than 26 people. There are very high expectations for faculty-student interactions, advising. I have students over for dinner. It's very interdisciplinary. At Gettysburg, without a doubt, the primary decision factor for tenure and promotion is, are you a good teacher? Nothing. If you don't teach well, you will not be promoted. And as it happens, my department places a particularly heavy emphasis on good pedagogy. The reason I tell you this, research expectations, I mean to say this as well, are what I call moderate, and there is probably fewer disagreements among the faculty on what should be required for tenure and promotion at a school like mine for research output. So I can't even tell you what that means, and I've been at Gettysburg for 9 years. What I'm saying is that the reason I got the job at Gettysburg is that I understood most of these factors when I crafted my application. Some of these were readily available from the job description. Others were available from the college website. I read the college mission. I looked into the department. I checked how many people were there and what they published and what they did. And so what that translates into is a perception of what we call a good fit for the department on my paperwork. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about today is how can you make your application one that reflects that you are a good candidate for the department that you're applying to. So there is some nuts and bolts. I think a lot of this has to do with how much time you have for a job application. In my case, I realized probably a year before my postdoctoral fellowship ended that my postdoctoral fellowship was going to end. And that is stressful, but that also gives you a lot of time to look. You may not have as much time, and you may also be realizing that academic hiring cycles are sometimes or oftentimes very peculiar. We say that new positions post daily, weekly, but they really come in bunches. So at schools like mine, if we're hiring somebody for this coming fall, we would have sent that job announcement to HR last August. We would have posted it in September. We would have received applications in November, December, interviewed people in January, and hired somebody by the month of February. So my first piece of advice is get this started early and start looking early. And the other thing I want to say here is budget your time, because once I started looking for jobs, this became a part of my job, and I definitely it required multiple hours a week for my job search. So typically postings follow an academic hiring cycle. We just completed a search of a faculty member who decided to leave the college, and so there's definitely hirings that are off these main cycles. And so most shorter term appointments in my institution are made somewhere between November, February, March, or even April. But look year round, there's often unexpected vacancies. And as I am an optimist, you can see this by my bottom line. There are still some new funding lines every once in a while, but they are getting rare and rare. So you are in a challenging job market. Where to look for a quote-unquote teaching job? Well, most of the searches are, of course, happening online now. I would advise you to pick your keywords, your search words carefully. You may be a physiologist, but you could teach biology or exercise science or even pharmacology courses. Don't eliminate jobs from your search because you can't find them. The APS jobs website is very helpful, as are the listservs. If you haven't joined, I recommend that you do that. I found my job on the Chronicle of Higher Education website, but there's also other academic news aggregators, higher ed aggregators such as Higher Ed Jobs, Inside Higher Ed, Science Jobs. Community college jobs can be an amazing experience for you and can be an amazing career for you to pursue. They are a really wonderful opportunity. And if you can, word of mouth and networking. Join professional societies, tell people they're looking. And in the bottom, I put institution human resource pages. I think that is probably, in my experience, not a worthwhile use of your time unless you're really looking to work at a particular college. All right, so there's many types of institutions. I searched broadly and I tried to be open-minded. And when I talk to my colleagues from around the country, I see some very significant disparities about how many job applicants they receive. So people who are near major population centers, Washington, I'm an hour and 15 out of Washington, D.C. Our math department has a job search. They get between 300 and 500 applications for one job. But I talk to people who are a little bit more in the hinterlands, and they can barely fill their search pool up with qualified or what they think are qualified candidates. And it's a shame because these institutions have an immense amount to offer. They can be wonderful places to start building your career. So I would say that I was perhaps not as broadly open to moving around at least the lower 48 than I was, and I think that added some stress and eliminated some really wonderful opportunities from my search. The types of schools, you know, when I talk to people, and it probably comes across, I love my job and I have the perfect job for me. But the truth of the matter is I took the job that was the best fit for me at the time. And I might be, for a reason of timing, I might be teaching physiology at a medical school or at a other regional state school or something similar. So it is really a little bit of a lottery. You are somewhat of a nomad as an academic. And be in mind, this is not always a permanent appointment. You are able to move, and that's how I ended up where I was. Position types we'll talk about separately. Be aware that there's many different kinds of appointments. You may have a semester-long appointment, you have a 9-month appointment, continuing contracts that are tenured or not tenured, 12 months appointments. Be aware of what you're going in. Be that as an adjunct, a part-time, a lecturer, an instructor, a visiting assistant professor, what's called an academic specialist. You might be operating out of a teaching resource center. You may be on a tenure track with a focus on education research or scientific research. Again, there are many different ways to have a productive and successful, enjoyable research career, and it's important to be aware of these. So when it comes to the secrets of looking at a job announcement, we talked about this a little bit. There's really not that many secrets. Carefully read and reread the job ad. It is in the institution's best interest that they hire the right person, and one way to hire the right person is to write a cohesive and coherent job announcement. That most of the time happens. So these jobs ads are mostly carefully crafted. What it says and doesn't say will give you clues about how to construct the application. Find out as much as you can before, and then personalize your application. And I think when you talk to people who have been in the hiring process, a source of frustration is when we see applications that has been copied and pasted from the last one this person applied to, and it reflects nothing about the values or specifics of the institution or the job. So take your time, write a specific job application. We also see a fair amount of applications that are submitted incorrectly or incompletely, which makes us doubt that when somebody does not manage to do that, how they're going to execute their job once they have it. So it definitely is helpful when the application is submitted as requested. And finally, good reference letters definitely help. They are a lot of work on the part of the reference or the person who gives you this recommendation. Give them enough time, and make sure that if you're part of your job responsibilities include teaching, that you have at least one person, in my opinion, that can speak specifically to your abilities as an instructor or a teacher. Apply early, don't wait until the deadline. And with that said, let's look at a couple of job announcements. So the first question that I would look at, or I did look at, what's the departmental need? And can I fill this departmental need? And if the answer to that is yes, I think that is a good sign. What's the position type? What's the teaching load? How many courses are you supposed to teach? What are required versus preferred applications? Am I asked to develop new courses or existing ones that are to be taken over, online or live? What's the departmental mission and the environment? What are the research and service expectations? How much does it pay? Is pay negotiable? That's a good question to ask for later. Is there a diversity, inclusiveness, equity statement? And how do I need to incorporate this into my application to show that my values reflect the values of my institution? And then finally, what materials must be submitted and how to submit my application. So I have a couple of ads that we can dissect, if you will. First one's for a non-tenure track assistant professor. This one's at the University, Michigan State University. This is what they normally look like. They're fairly impenetrable at first glance, but if we highlight the important things, there is a pattern that emerges. So it's a non-tenure track assistant professor faculty position, PhD neuroscience should be held, have completed neuroscience-related dissertation research, postdoctoral training and teaching experience is held by the ideal candidate. This is a rapidly expanding department. That probably indicates the needs for flexibility. You're going to develop, teach, lab, lecture, and online courses. There is mention of a service mission of this department in the first paragraph. You should take I would take note of this. And then Michigan State is deeply committed to excellent undergraduate education and has extensive professional development support for faculty, including workshops, seminars, and technical online education expertise. If I'm writing this application, by the time I write the application, I know what these resources are, and I make mention of these resources in my application and how excited I am to take advantage of these. These are there for a very good reason. MSU is committed to achieving excellence through cultural diversity. How would you address this in your application? And then at the bottom, typically, nuts and bolts. Read these carefully. In this case, the letters of recommendation go to a different source or site than the application material is concerned. Make your reviewer's job easy. We'll do one more, and I have a third one, but we'll skip that one in the interest of time, but we can look at it in a little while. Here's one for a tenure track faculty at a small college. This is from Professor DeRusso's college at Lemoyne. 2 tenure track openings, broadly trained biologist. One needs to teach anatomy and physiology and additional courses within the area of specialty. What would that be? We would like you to see implementing a research program that encourages undergraduate participation. This changes your application completely because now you have to show some evidence about how you would do that and that you're able to do this. Credentials, and again, the nuts and bolts of the application process. So there is a lot of information in there, and our experience has been that if you follow these informations, you will be more likely to succeed. So in my experience over the past 10 years or so, here's some common predictors of what works. If I read an application that says, here's convincing evidence that I would love to and am able to do this job well, that typically bodes well. And that word evidence is carefully chosen because everybody says I love to teach and I want to teach and I like to spend my time in the classroom. But if you have evidence at all, this is the time, in my experience, to show that to me. I can meet the needs communicated by this job description. That's why you were there after all. So how are you going to fulfill these departmental needs? My former department chair at the University of Maryland, Jane Clark, said we hire swans. And if you're wondering, a swan is somebody who's smart, works hard, is adaptable, and nice. These are the colleagues that she was looking for, and we've hired some swans, and we have had good success with those. What works a little bit less well if you have a lack of evidence for a desire to teach. In other words, you may not be as good of a fit as you think you are. You may be a good fit, you're just not showing it. Your application isn't prepared as well as it should be. We sometimes get people who are very confident in their skills and try to convince us of how they're going to improve our academic institution. Be careful with that and see how you would add to the mission. And there's people that eliminate themselves from the applicant pool of my institution because they don't want to live in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And I would say to those folks is give these institutions a chance. It's important to practice your interviews. And you may also be surprised by what these institutions that you're disregarding have to offer. So reviewing the secrets, read the job ad. Be sure you have a complete application submitted. Simple mistakes can really cause you some trouble down the road. Tailor each application specifically and get good letters submitted by the deadline that talk about your interest and background in teaching. There's more information here. We will have this posted online, and good luck with your job search. I am running a little over time, so we're going to move on to the next speaker. Thank you for your time.